How does a city, once a strategic bridge of peace, become a pincer of despair? Welcome to Kaliningrad, a tiny enclave of the Russian Federation, almost a world of its own, wedged between Poland and Lithuania. This geographical anomaly that once symbolized connection has turned into a symbol of entrapment, leaving its people grappling with suffocating economic sanctions. Since mid-2022, Kaliningrad has been isolated by strict EU sanctions, blocking essential road transit from mainland Russia. With freight traffic effectively stifled, the region's logistical capabilities have teetered on the brink of collapse. Rail routes remain, but only barely, while barriers of strict regulations and customs procedures tighten around this already beleaguered enclave. The dire truth is that Kaliningrad is in a tailspin. It is not merely facing challenges, it is collapsing. The numbers tell a catastrophic story. Once, over 1,800 companies participated in international freight transport in Kaliningrad. By June 2024, that number plummeted to 1,342. By early 2025, experts warned that only around 700 companies might remain. That's more than a 60% decline in just a few years. In the aftermath, over 300 businesses closed their doors forever. More than 3,000 vehicles vanished from the streets, either sold off or rendered useless. Over 4,000 people faced financial insecurity, with thousands more looking into the uncertain abyss of unemployment. The toll? A staggering loss of 9 billion rubles. What does this mean for daily life? Imagine a transportation artery slowly choking, and you understand the gravity of this situation. Road freight, vital for society's heartbeat, is being suffocated. The cascading effects are devastating. Lithuania's halt on transit for goods under EU sanctions has paralyzed Kaliningrad's ability to export and import essential materials, from construction steel to technology components. Currently, rail transport presents a faint glimmer of hope, yet it is shackled to bureaucratic constraints, preventing any significant relief. Why has the cost of trucking surged by 239,000 rubles? An unprecedented 200% spike in operational costs is not merely a complaint, it's a death knell for business viability. With debt mounting and vehicle utilization rates dropping, companies are drowning. The waiting lines at borders stretch for kilometers, drivers confront long hours of uncertainty, infrastructure woes, and ever-growing financial drain. Every new administrative hurdle cascades into further expenses. Each day under these conditions pushes companies closer to bankruptcy. What about ferry transportation? On the surface, routes from Baltiysk to Ust-Luga seem like a glimmer of hope. But they too are mired in a mess of inefficiencies. Storms disrupt schedules, port capacities struggle under the strain, and sanctions complicate everything further. Kaliningrad's logistical fabric is in tatters. Amid this turmoil, a story of desperation unfolds. Heavy vehicle drivers, who, seeking better opportunities, migrated to foreign companies in hopes of stability, are now contemplating a painful return. The burden of sanctions has crushed not just local businesses but the ones they relied on abroad, leading to wage cuts and new pressures. They left Kaliningrad because of its collapsing economy, only to discover that even their new employers are struggling to survive. Back in Kaliningrad, only about 6,000 vehicles remain operational. As businesses shutter, customers scramble for the products that once graced the shelves. Supplies of construction materials dwindle, leading to stagnation on building sites. The fragility of the supply chain reflects starkly in rising prices for basic goods. Government statements that claim a variety of products are still ring hollow. Shelves bear witness to rising costs and dwindling options, leaving consumers with little choice. Fuel availability remains fragile, with disruptions rippling through storage and supply lines. Timely and affordable access to fuel remains a mystery intertwined with complex logistics, escalating costs, and the ongoing sanctions regime. The situation resembles a harsh reality where every step taken in one direction feels like a retreat in another. So, what can possibly save Kaliningrad? How do we remedy this widening chasm of economic despair? Calls for expanding ferry routes, backing with internal subsidies, and creating customs corridors arise, incentives to breathe life back into an ailing transport network. But the heart of the issue lies within a tangled web of politics and logistics. Can mere monetary support heal the gaping wounds inflicted by international barriers? As logistics fade, the entire economy grinds to a halt. The rippling consequences of Kaliningrad's struggles are indicators of broader issues facing entire industries across Russia. This fractured region serves as a harsh mirror, reflecting the country's larger struggles as it grapples with external pressures. The situation reveals discomforting truths about how interconnected economic flow is. Where one area falters, many others ache. Is there a way forward from this encroaching darkness? Only time will tell. In the depths of the crisis that turned Kaliningrad into a geopolitical pawn, figures reveal a stark reality: the transport sector is losing 9 billion rubles. This region, a crucial logistical point for Russia, was already reeling from 2.3 billion rubles in losses last year due to sanctions from the European Union. These numbers dramatically underscore the importance of freight transport, especially road transport, as the lifeblood of any nation's economy. In this enclave, trading life is sustained through connections beyond its borders. Political decisions and customs regulations are essential; they form the very air needed for trade to thrive. However, a pivotal change occurred in June 2022 when Lithuania halted the transit of goods bound for Kaliningrad, including vital resources like construction steel and machinery. This decision severed Kaliningrad's import and export capabilities, leaving the region struggling to bridge the gap to the Russian mainland. While the EU allowed some leeway for rail transport, road access was heavily restricted, creating enormous challenges. Trains might have a waiting capacity, but trucks are the ones that provide door-to-door service, making them indispensable. The costs for truck operations skyrocketed by an incredible 239,000 rubles. The system is breaking down, with costs rising above 200%. It's not just a complaint, but a warning bell for the death of logistics math. With vehicle usage plummeting by 60%, essential expenses such as insurance and salaries still demand attention, making survival costly. Imagine long lines of trucks idling for hours at the border, frustration palpable in the air as drivers feel the pressure mounting from every direction. Repeated delays and new emissions regulations push costs higher. Each new mandate becomes another burden, leading companies down the destructive path toward bankruptcy. As if that's not enough, the fate of cargo transportation via ferries seems to spiral downward into chaos. Initially seen as a potential savior, ferry routes from Baltiysk to Ust-Luga and other key ports are hemmed in by severe limitations. Stormy seasons drastically reduce capacity, while delays stemming from customs frustrations arise. In a world where every second, every ruble counts, these barriers and uncertainties echo like ominous thunder in the distance. What lies ahead for this beleaguered region as more and more drivers rush back to familiar shores? Will Kaliningrad succumb to irreversible economic decay, or will innovative solutions arise from the ashes of a logistical nightmare? Stick around, as we unravel the gripping tale of resilience amidst adversity. In a world of stark contrasts, the once promising ferry routes from Baltiysk to Ust-Luga and major Russian ports shine like a mirage, offering salvation that is increasingly elusive. These routes, meant to facilitate trade, are bogged down by a cruel trifecta: time constraints, soaring costs, and unpredictable maritime conditions. Stormy weather delays everything, and the overload on warehouse capabilities makes it nearly impossible to synchronize customs processes. The sanctions imposed on EU-flagged carriers add another layer of complexity, creating an economic weight that seems unbearable. The situation grows dire within the railway sector as well. Items that should seamlessly flow face bureaucratic hurdles, caught in a web of technical constraints tied to wagon-switching logistics. Meanwhile, third-party operators, once eager to transport Kaliningrad's cargo, now shy away due to the murky waters of concealed sanctions floating in the air like a fog. Within this haze, personal stories unfold. Heavy vehicle drivers from Kaliningrad, who once left for promising jobs in Lithuania and Poland between 2022 and 2023, seeking better pay and a steadier lifestyle, now find themselves reconsidering their paths in mid-2024. The reality? The very companies they turn to for relief are struggling under similar burdens. As Elena Bourbonets from the Regional Business Group painted for Kaliningrad.ru, it's a relentless cycle of retreat and despair. They sought refuge elsewhere when things became unbearable at home. Yet now, they face the same pressures abroad, their initial hopes evaporate. The market awaiting their return features only 6,000 remaining vehicles, a stark contraction, with companies halved and customers grappling with cash flow crises. The consequences can be felt on the streets. Construction projects stall, feeling the sting of delayed material shipments. The once reliable supply chains for cement and glass now tremble under the weight of increased prices, reflecting a shocking reality for both professionals and everyday citizens. The question hangs heavy in the air: can Kaliningrad's trade pathways be salvaged before the region sinks into irretrievable chaos? With every twist and turn of this story, the stakes rise, and the clock ticks ominously on. During a time when trade routes were once bustling with life, Kaliningrad now finds itself at a crossroads. The region's turmoil has not just halved businesses, it has sent shockwaves through entire communities. The chilling effect is evident on construction sites, which grind to a halt when the flow of materials stops. Workers stare at idle cranes, their hopes for progress fading like the dust swirling in the wind. Meanwhile, as costs soar, the cost of construction materials reflects a dramatic decline. The fragility of essential supply chains, like those for cement and steel, mirrors the collapse of Kaliningrad's once thriving economy. In January 2025, officials declared an array of products were still being transported. Yet, as shoppers peeked at the shelves, they noticed substitutes, more costly and of inferior quality. The focus shifted from brand loyalty to pricing, where desperation ruled the day. The food market became a volatile gamble, cold chain disruptions meant soggy produce and products past their prime. Retailers wrestled with stock that barely made it to customers without spoiling. Fuel availability painted a stark picture. Even within Russia, the supply chain for refineries faced disruptions. Delivering fuel to regional stations became a logistical nightmare, as complex equations of supply required solutions reminiscent of a chemistry problem. Under sanctions, this zero-sum game became more dire. When one aspect of logistics falters, others feel the chokehold. This dire situation reveals a greater issue intertwined with Russia's economic fabric. Once hailed as a beacon for investors, Kaliningrad's Special Economic Zone, or SEZ, offered tantalizing tax benefits and geographical advantages. Now, that promise feels hollow as the EU border, which was a gateway to opportunity, has become an impenetrable wall. The once viable door-to-door policies have shrunk, giving way to an impenetrable barrier to trade. Investors are now wary, factoring in time, risk, and cost, all while feeling hopeless in the dust of bureaucracy. Banks seek stability, which necessitates clear rules and borders. Without these essential facets, financial lines are as elusive as reaching water in a barren desert. The plea for support from business groups has morphed into an urgent siren, echoing the need for interventions to revive international road transport through Kaliningrad, especially in light of the travel restrictions imposed by Lithuania. What measures could be implemented to lift Kaliningrad from its bleak reality? Expanding ferry routes between Baltiask and Ust-Luga is a possibility, paired with state subsidies for freight costs. These measures could grant a temporary reprieve, but as it stands, they are mere band-aids over a gaping wound. The real question remains: can Kaliningrad survive the storm, or will it succumb to the heavy hand of isolation? What happens when a vital region becomes a pawn in a geopolitical game? The answer lies in Kaliningrad, a Russian enclave stranded between two EU nations. This city, once thriving on its logistical prowess, now faces collapse. As sanctions tighten their grip, the lifeblood of its economy, logistics, struggles to survive. The recent open letter to the regional governor signals an urgent cry for assistance. It's not merely a plea, it's a warning about the dire state of international road transport faced with brutal restrictions. What steps could be taken to reverse this trend? The mind races through potential solutions: expanding ferry routes from Baltiask to Ust-Luga, covering freight cost differentials with government support, and perhaps creating green corridors for smoother customs transitions. However, these are not silver bullets. They're merely palliative measures in a system confronting deep-seated issues at the intersection of logistics and politics. As borders tighten and international corridors become impassable, these temporary solutions merely manage the symptoms, they don't heal the wound. The very essence of a country's mobility is at stake. When mobility falters, so does the economy's vitality. In Kaliningrad, this deterioration has already manifested in irreversible ways. Small transport companies shutter their doors, family businesses crumble under financial strain, and experienced drivers flee their once stable careers. Vehicles, essential to operations, are sold off or scrapped, their costs soaring, burying any hope for recovery. This erosion of resources paints a stark picture. Reviving a fleet after it has been dismantled is no small feat, it can take years. The looming reality is clear, Kaliningrad teeters on the edge of collapse. Its logistics are paralyzed, confirmed by the stark figures, open letters, and somber official statements. The larger narrative reveals a painful truth: Russia itself is grappling with significant challenges. The breakdown of this enclave indicates that the nation is experiencing systemic issues with its supply chains and production capabilities. In this web of complication, Kaliningrad emerges not only as a geographical anomaly but as a reflection of a nation in turmoil. The sharp geopolitical landscape surrounding it intensifies the stakes. As we examine the layers of this crisis, geopolitical, legal, and economic, one must confront an unsettling reality. The situation in Kaliningrad is a tale of a once thriving region now overshadowed by the burden of external pressures. Imagine the heartbeat of a nation slowing down, because without steady freight flows, no production sparks to life. Without plans, supply chains inflate like overblown balloons, and inflation balloons into a gaping void, draining vitality fast. Kaliningrad isn't just a tiny spot on the map. That's the summary of where we've been. Now, picture this: is Kaliningrad the cracked reflection of Russia's hidden vulnerability? A mirror that warps the nation's image into something fragile and fading? Dive deeper with me, as we unfold a three-layered kaleidoscope. Layer 1, the geopolitical storm. NATO and the EU have drawn a tight loop around the Baltic, strangling ties, turning Lithuania, Poland, Latvia into gatekeepers of suspicion. On legal and security pretexts, they've squeezed Russia out, leaving Kaliningrad adrift like an island, chained to the sea and creaking railways. The scent of salty Baltic winds mixes with the diesel fumes from ports, the grind of wagon wheels echoing distant tensions. Feel the chill? That's the administrative legal layer unfolding, cloaked in bureaucracy, but it's pure politics in disguise. The EU Commission's rule on railway ceilings, averaging past year's traffic, demands razor-sharp discretion. Wagon requests, exemptions, every tweak filters through political meshes, not a smooth track, but a bottleneck chock full of delays. The air thickens with the rustle of papers, the thud of stamped forms, drivers cursing under their breath as queues snarl. And the road closure? Oh, it triggers an avalanche of fallout. CMR cargo insurance spikes. ADRIMDG dangerous goods rules tighten, driver visas turn into nightmares, work permits vanish, vehicle checks and emission standards? Skyrocketing costs, like thorns pricking every mile. Sanctions classify carriers, insiders pay premiums, outsiders get exiled, crumbling in a cascade of red ink. The tactile sting of high-risk fees bites hard, leather gloves gripping steering wheels grow clammy with stress. Hear the echo? What if this narrowing corridor isn't just inconvenience, but a humiliation tactic forcing Russia to scramble? But wait, when highways slam shut, costs double, substitute routes jam, sea and rail can't keep up, raw materials soar in price, while exports dim in appeal, stuck in that cursed quality timing value trap. Suddenly, the twist: Kaliningrad's once thriving zones fracture, investors flee the fog of unpredictability. No wonder the enclave's logistics arrhythmia spells national malaise, prophetic whispers of bigger calamities ahead, making you wonder, how long before this isolation engulfs the whole map? The domino's edge looms. What revelations lurk in that administrative fog? As the pathway tightens, the struggles within intensify. With highways effectively shut, the cost of substitution skyrockets. Railways and sea routes fall short, causing essential goods to become overly expensive, while customers hesitate due to rising prices. At this juncture, urgent questions linger for political leaders and industry operators. How can these corridors diversify? Despite claims from regional authorities that a variety of products is still moving, these proclamations tend to highlight quality over quantity. While a product may exist, timely delivery at a fair price is what truly adds value. The economic reality is painted starkly against the backdrop of political tensions. With fixed costs tied to logistics, driver salaries, fuel prices, ferry tolls, maintenance, and more, these expenditures have not decreased. In fact, they have only grown as risk factors surge. If compliance checks aren't in place to ensure shipments aren't affected by sanctions, penalties loom. The Kaliningrad carrier's alarming report of a 239,000 ruble increase in costs per truck reveals the hidden financial burdens. A staggering 60% drop in vehicle utilization means that fixed costs are pushed onto the fewer runs that are still being made, making profitability a distant dream. A dire consequence of this scenario is the erosion of human capital. Truck drivers are not just cogs in the machine, they embody a complex blend of expertise and regional adaptability. The transition to driving for companies in Lithuania and Poland seemed like a lifeline. Yet rising costs and intense pressure have driven many back to Kaliningrad by 2024. But the market they return to is no longer the one they left. Capacity has shrunk, wages have faltered, and the familiar landscape of opportunity has faded. With these upheavals, Kaliningrad finds itself ensnared in a vicious cycle, desperately retraining its drivers while surrendering to the relentless pressures of a transformed economic environment. Each day sees a deeper entrenchment into chaos, where recovery feels not just challenging but almost impossible. In the heart of a geopolitical quagmire lies Kaliningrad, a city severed from its motherland, surrounded by the currents of tension between Lithuania and Poland. Once seen as a potential bridge connecting nations, it is now trapped in a relentless grip of sanctions and turmoil. Since the summer of 2022, the roads that once buzzed with trade have become mere shadows of their previous selves, constricted by EU sanctions that block crucial transit routes. A labyrinth of bureaucracy has left this enclave gasping for breath, as the lifeline of logistics twists into a noose. At the core of this crisis is a staggering loss. From over 1,800 transport companies in 2022, only around 700 remain, a devastating decline that paints a grim picture of economic survival. Imagine the sound of engines fading away, the echo of closed businesses, and the lives disrupted as more than 4,000 professions vanish overnight. Each statistic tells a harrowing story, yet they pale compared to the human toll: households torn asunder, dreams dashed. The layers of trouble grow deeper. Those daring to brave the journey into foreign markets are met with obstacles, complicated customs processes and heightened scrutiny weigh like chains around their feet. With an alarming 60% drop in vehicle use, the costs burdening remaining enterprises swell, squeezing their very lifeblood. Trucks stall in endless lines at border crossings, painfully aware that each minute wasted translates to mounting financial strife. Amidst this chaos, hope flickers dimly. Proposed solutions echo in the corridors of power, diversifying trade routes, investing in infrastructure, and simplifying regulations. Yet these measures merely mask the malignant growth of deep-seated issues. The reality is severe. Without a radical realignment of geopolitical relations, Kaliningrad is akin to an island sinking gradually beneath the waves. As tragedies unfold in this limbo, drivers once lured to neighboring countries for better prospects are plotting their return, driven by nostalgia and the haunting silence of a market in decay. The cyclical decline contorts opportunities, leaving behind a barren landscape devoid of promise. What now for Kaliningrad? Without a substantial shift, this enclave may exemplify how one region can mirror a nation's broader decline, revealing not just economic fractures but the urgent need for change. To piece together a path forward, urgent discussions are needed. Can we reshape corridors of trade? Can we bridge the divide between politics and logistics? Time, that most precious asset, runs short. The repercussions of Kaliningrad's implosion extend beyond its borders, intertwining with the fabric of regional stability. The questions linger heavy in the air: can hope be rekindled, and can a solution be found amid the growing despair? Only time, and the courage to change, will tell. Kaliningrad, a Russian city far removed from the mainland, lies wedged between Lithuania and Poland. Inherited from Soviet times, its geography offered a bridge in peaceful days. Now, amid sanctions, it forms a crushing vice. Since summer 2022, EU restrictions have obstructed road shipments of key goods from Russia to Kaliningrad through Lithuania. Rail transit survives as a fragile lifeline, limited to historical averages. Strict road enforcements block passage. Rail openings remain meager. Sea ferry capacities hover at limits. These constrictions clash, disrupting the region's supply pulse. Evidence today unites on one grim truth. Kaliningrad crumbles. Its movement stalls. Russia faces entrapment. Recall our prior discussion. Hidden barriers evolved into stark rules. The EU now weighs collective punishments fallout, not merely ethical, but starkly practical. Choking Kaliningrad ignites security rifts across the Baltic. Overlooked rifts turn strides into stumbling hazards. Imagine the earth shattering beneath your feet. Could one trapped enclave fracture an empire's spine? Staggering revelation: Kaliningrad's collapse echoes through Russia's core, mirroring how a domino's fall starts avalanches. Logistics freeze, industries gasp, livelihoods evaporate. Picture it, a siege masked as isolation. Numbers scream betrayal. Firms plummeted from 1,822 to 1,342 by June 2024. Plunging to 700 by early 2025. Over 300 businesses bankrupted in a year. 3,000 vehicles scrapped or sidelined. 4,000 workers displaced, professions shattered. 2,000 more teeter on the edge. Losses tallying 9 billion rubles. Atop 2023's 2.3 billion blow from sanctions. Freight veins pulse as a nation's heartbeat. In this isolated pocket, ties to the world demand political breaths, fine administrative tunes, customs flows, border safeguards. Lithuania's June 2022 shift barred sanctioned items: steels, metals, machines, techs, parts, luxuries, chemical feeds. Road routes crippled Kaliningrad's ties to Russia's heart. EU eased rails to pass norms, yet roads stayed locked. Trains endure weights and caps. Trucks deliver door to door, facing endless holds. Operators lament costs soaring 239,000 rubles per vehicle. Stuck in a 200% hike system, its math imploding business. Utilization dived 60%. Fixed outlays, insurances, repairs, leases, wages, fuels, tolls, swell like defying gravity. Long queues chug at Lithuanian crossings, grinding hours. Baltic routes jam with German-Scandinavian snarls. Financial clamps tighten, Polish docks pile on, norms on emissions sharpen, EU pools brand Russian plates high risk, a relentless chain reaction. Rule upon rule heaps new burdens per truck, burdens birth cash crunches per firm, crunches spawn fresh bankruptcies. What of sea corridors? Ferries from Baltiisk to Ust Luga port hubs promise relief, but sink in capacity time cost quagmires. Storms batter, cargoes unload slow, warehouses and customs clash under sanctions on EU ships, sparking delays and price spikes. Rails echo troubles. Even uncapped freights hit bureaucracy, wagon shortages, switch flaws. Fearful foreign haulers shun Kaliningrad halls amid stealth sanctions. Through the haze, human tales surface. Drivers fled Lithuanian, Polish firms in 2022 to 2023. Chasing steady pay, futures. By mid-2024, reversals unfold. Foreign burdens mount, sanctions weigh, wages slash. Regional business rep Elena Bourbonets captures the cycle. They bolted as home faltered. Now, retreats beckon as EU carriers buckle. Yet, the homecoming market shrinks, 6,000 vehicles linger, firms halved, clients' funds dried. Micro-calamities hit homes. Construction slows as materials lag. Fragile cement steel glass change jolt prices skyward. Regional claims in January 2025 hail diverse goods flowing, but shelves brim with pricier stand-ins. Buyers favor bargains over labels, food cold chains fail, spoilage rises, flavors fade. Fuel draws alarms, refinery disruptions ripple, imported in this disconnected zone demands complex formulas. Under sanctions, equations zero-sum, gains here lose air there. The Grand View ties links Russia's industrial web. Kaliningrad special zone lured investments, autos, electrons, foods, biotaxes, seas, bridges near EU, despite mainland severance. Borders morphed from portals to barricades sever the zone's backbone. Doors shrink, walls loom. Investors balk at freight time risk tolls. Lenders crave certainty. Edges and codes absent, funds turn deserts, scarce, costly. The open plea to Governor Alexei Besprodny, insufficient aid. Alarm rings. Bolster Kaliningrad's cross-border trucking, amid Lithuanian transit bans. What remedies? Ferry boosts from Baltiysk, Ust Luga, big ports. State subsidies bridging ship rates. Incentives easing leases, insurances. Green lanes through Belarus customs to Kaliningrad. Aid for drivers returns, exporter perks and tariffs. But pause, these syrup, not salve. Ailment fuses logistics, politics. Corridors sealed, subsidies stabilize blood flow, wounds gape unfixed. Mobility shackled, economies every gear drags. Kaliningrad's deceleration breeds irreversible scars. Vanishing haulers never reopening. Family shops wrecked. Skilled drivers hard to reclaim. Fleets scrapped, replacement costs doubled. Human and machine erosion builds. Fleets vanish overnight, rebuild spans years. No hyperbole, Kaliningrad collapses. Logistics paralyzed. Open pleas, ledgers, official admissions confirm. Flashback interrupts, vivid relic of yesteryear, before tides turned. Remember pre-2022 haunts, diesel fumes wafting thick in air, engines revving like thunder, hands gripping grease-slicked tools loading crates, laughter echoing over stacked haunted pallets, warmth of camaraderie against Baltic chill. What now? Knots in politics inevitably bind, only to fracture unforeseen strands. Kaliningrad strife unearths grave woe for Russia. Paralyzed enclave signals distress to the core. Cargo grinds to halt. Vital components missing, industry's elusive parts, chemistry's rare solvents, agriculture's prized feeds, retail's essential wraps. Bills accrue, stinging the city and Russia's wider trade. Political credence looms. Transporters' cries of scant backing gauge governance's worth. Market measures trust, forged in daily machinery hum, not hollow pledges. Admins boast 700 firms sustaining varieties. Yet ground truth? Undermined, how? Responses demand factual triad, numbers, dates, origins. Which paths, on what days, to what volumes? Who subsidizes gaps? How rights streamline? Affirmative? Trust revives. Negative? It vanishes. Kaliningrad saga transcends coastal whimsy. It embodies economic veins throbbing. Those veins constrict, asphyxiate. Reality bites, Kaliningrad crumbles. Movement collapses. Russia ensnared in deep peril. Triumvirate truths verified. Awaits the fourth, remedy. Tonics deplete. Discovery of cure, or foundations quake anew. Paths open through tech strides, diplomatic yields. Absent that, Kaliningrad etches deepest rift, wounding itself and Russia's fiscal soul. Why this injustice? Feel the ache, the grime clinging in endless weights, exhaust's acrid bite searing lungs, metal chills numbing skin amid border snarls. Defiance rises, Europe's own carriers stagger, wages slashed, retreats forced. Cruel cycle, exodus for breaks, returns to ruin. Twist lurks, EU refines mechanisms now, fearing consequences of harms. Collective woes, no longer mere conscience, dictate survival. Will fractures widen, halting progress altogether? Can Russia reverse, or does chasm devour all? Imagine a city cut off from its homeland, a tiny island of Russian soil wedged between lands that once promised connection but now clutch it like a vice. The air hums with the rumble of stalled trucks, the sour stench of rusty metal fills the streets, and the bitter chill of empty warehouses bites at the skin. Kaliningrad, isolated between Lithuania and Poland, inherited this twisted geography from bygone Soviet days. It was meant as a peaceful bridge, but in the shadow of sanctions, it has become a cruel pincer strangling life itself. Since summer 2022, those EU restrictions slammed shut road paths from Russia's heartland, barring key goods like steel, metals, machinery, tech, luxury items, and vital chemicals. Rail limps on with a fragile thread, capped at last year's averages, while ferries struggle against waves and weather. Together, these choke points have thrown the region's economic pulse into chaotic arrhythmia. All facts scream one brutal